So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Guy McPherson here, and I am very excited to have my guest today, Sarah Ramsey. Sarah, welcome.
Hello, Guy. How are you?
All right, I'm doing great. So Sarah is a toxic relationship specialist, life coach, and NLP Master Practitioner who helps amazing women remember how amazing they are after enduring the pain of a toxic partner or parent. She works with women who've experienced toxic relationships and who remain stuck in a cycle of pain and confusion, transform their minds and lives by taking back their power, recreating a life they're excited about living, and bringing renewed energy, clarity, and excellence into establishing careers and relationships they love. Sarah's work has been featured in the Emotional Abuse Recovery and Resilience Summit, Healing Narcissistic Trauma Conference, Medium, Thrive Global, the Elephant Journal, and the Courageous Women Summit. Not too bad.
Hey, and it's gotten better since then. I think since we booked this call, my book's come out, so we can add best-selling author to the list.
There you go.
I'm excited.
Well, look, yeah. Again, thanks for joining me. Before we get going here, Sarah, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you're currently calling from.
I'm in Tennessee, I'm in the fastest growing city in the U.S. right now, Knoxville, Tennessee, which is, they know it because all the U-Hauls are stopping here. So thank goodness I'm not trying to buy a house.
Okay.
And I grew up here, but before the pandemic, I called myself like bi-coastal because I was in Texas part of the time, Florida part of the time, which isn't really bi-coastal. But just working, I'm very grateful to have a career that I can work from anywhere. But yes, currently I'm in the fastest growing city in the US.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. So, I don't even know why I'm hesitating. How the heck did you get into this field that you're in? That's what I'm after.
Yes. When I was a little girl, I dreamed of being a toxic relationship specialist, right? People always joke and they say, oh, was there a toxic relationship you're recovering from? And I'm like, that is so nice of you to think there was just one. You're giving me a lot of credit here. But I grew up as a pastor's daughter. So tons of people pleasing, tons of meeting other people's expectations, their needs for me, which led me to think if I worked hard enough, I could get people to love me. And so that was a little bit of my personal journey. And then there was a teenager who was killed in her bed by her boyfriend, the toxic boyfriend. And after that experience, I started a mental health campaign that quickly received national attention, and then started other positive behavior initiatives within high schools, and then decided that the best way to help kids was to help their moms. And here I am.
So what is a toxic relationship? What does that mean? I mean, I guess people could surmise and speculate, but how do you define that?
I love that question because my passion in life is to make that question much more simple than it currently is. Even as I tell that story and it's like there was a teenager killed in her bed, it was on Dateline. That's this horrible, that's like stage 4 cancer. That's obviously like the absolute worst case scenario. But a toxic relationship is really a relationship where both parties are not playing by the same set of rules. Okay. There's a pattern of one person always winning, a pattern of it always being a really good deal for only one of the parties. And that person makes the rules, that person gets to break the rules, that person gets to enforce the rules, and the other person's job is to follow the rules. And I think that is there's like this game being played that only one person understands what's happening. So it feels like the finish line is always moving and only one person really has the power within the relationship rather than it being a partnership or, a healthy dynamic.
So, let me just get something in my eye here. So it's and correct me if I'm wrong here. It sounds obviously very manipulative. Mm-hmm. It sounds like it can be abusive or bordering on abuse. Yeah. And it also sounds like it's a slippery slope. Like you could even get into it and you're not really aware that it is toxic before it's, by the time it's too late.
And that's really my passion, is to, right now we have domestic violence awareness or child abuse awareness, some of those type things, or sex trafficking. But these are all in, like, if you're thinking about it in terms of cancer, that is stage 4 cancerous cells.
Right.
And as a society, we are intelligent enough to say, we don't only talk about cancer when you're about to die. That's horrible. We talk about the early stages, early prevention, precancerous cells, healthy lifestyle to prevent cancer. And I really want to change, when you get into words like abuse, yes, obviously it is abusive, but even that word, people are like, well, but they didn't hit me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you start making these excuses for why one person gets all the power in your life.
Right. Let me go back just a little bit. So you talked about the young woman, I guess, who was killed by her.
Emma Walker.
Why did that inspire you to take action?
Because she was not the typical stereotype. I hate the stereotype surrounding abuse, right? Or toxic relationships. It's like, well, they're from the wrong side of town. Well, they're from a broken family. Well, they're, from a certain socioeconomic or race or whatever else it may be. And it was really the idea that, no, this happens in the best of households. This happens with, even in healthy relationship, healthy parents see their beautiful child get sucked into this situation because of her kindness. Okay. And because of my kindness in my own life, my own kindness has been used against me. I thought, I just need to be nicer. I need to be more loving. I need to be more forgiving. I need to be more loyal. I need to be more so that the relationship can be okay. And it is incredibly healthy to think in relationships we need to do our own self-work. Obviously, we need to work on improving ourselves. We need to cover over our weaknesses and figure out ways to maximize our strengths. That's great human growth. But in a relationship, if only one person is doing the work of the relationship, then it's what I call smart girl or smart guy syndrome. Okay. Right now, the conversation's about codependency. Well, you have a bad self-esteem, so you put up with that. And when I think Bill Cosby, I grew up loving Bill Cosby. You probably loved Bill Cosby at one point in your life. And when you start to hear that he has this like horrid history of abusing women, it's like, I remember thinking, oh, that can't be true. Oh, not Bill Cosby. I know Bill Cosby, right? We all thought we knew him. He sells us pudding. He's funny. That can't be true. And then we find out that we were tricked. Okay. But we probably don't look at our own lives and say, well, Bill Cosby tricked me, so now I'm codependent, or I'm stupid, or I'm dumb, or I'm broken, or I have self-esteem issues. He was just good at manipulating people. Mm-hmm. He was good at image management. And currently, every expert agrees, it's at least 1 in 10 people who have some type of personality disorder. So that means we all know someone who's tricking us and making us think they're a good person. Or I don't want to say good, bad, because that gets into a really icky conversation. But, we think someone in our lives is trustworthy, who in fact is focused on image management and flipping responsibility, where they're never responsible for anything.
So if we kind of dialed in a little bit more, what might this look like in a quote unquote typical relationship?
Yeah, I call it a toxic person encounter, because even there, when you say relationship, it's like, is that romantic or is it not? And it's easy to look down on someone who has a bad dating history or a divorce. It's like, gosh, that was so stupid. I can't believe you put up with that. Right. But then going back to the Bill Cosby example, it's like, oh, well, I'm not dumb for having been in a bad business deal. Bertie Madoff, right? It's like these people that invested in him, no one called them codependent. Mm-hmm. He manipulated them. And there's people in our lives who can manipulate us. So you asked what that looked like. Very much controlling behavior, what I call the flip. So if you come to me, Guy, and you say, it really bothered me when you couldn't see me on Tuesday, and I pull the flip on you and I say, well, that shouldn't bother you. You're too sensitive. Maybe if you weren't so needy, then I wouldn't have to always show up for Tuesday. Maybe you should work on yourself instead of worrying about what I'm doing. Or why do you not trust me? Are you cheating on me? Is something going on that you think I'm not trustworthy? But you see that it flips and the conversation instantly has you on defense.
Right.
And you see that play out over and over and over with parents, right? You know, how dare you not show up for me? How dare you not take care of me? It's heaping a lot of guilt on someone. And that can either look like a very controlling personality where they get to tell you who you need to be, or very victim personality, which is like, oh, you poor, I'm so pitiful. You should rearrange your whole life to help me.
So are the two people who are involved in this relationship, are they kind of automatically attracted to one another?
I love this conversation. And so, sometimes yes. Okay. Absolutely. Oh, I like to be needed. You know, I want to feel important. How could they live without me? You know, I'm the only person who understands them. Absolutely. Or it may feel safe for someone else to make your decisions for you, because then you don't feel like you have to take responsibility for your decisions. That can be true. Absolutely.
Right, sure.
I do believe are you familiar with the Big Five personality test?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cornell did a study in people with toxic relationships through Sandra L. Brown. And within that study, it talked about how high people who had been in traumatic relationships or toxic relationships scored in agreeableness and openness. Okay. We think about being agreeable and open as a good quality. Mm-hmm. But toxic people also think it is a good quality. They're willing to be very forgiving. They are willing to, overlook bad behavior. They're willing to work on themselves rather than trying to get me to work on myself. Oh, they're willing to be self-aware enough to take the blame. Right. These are incredibly fabulous qualities that are strengths that can be used against us rather than just weaknesses we need to overcome.
It sounds horrifying.
It is horrifying.
I mean, so what do you do specifically? How do you work with people?
Mm-hmm. Oh, through the whole process?
Yeah.
Well, after a toxic relationship, there's a 3-point process that I work people through. Well, I'll say this. Usually before people work with me, they're in this real processing stage, like, oh, my mother's a narcissist, right? So they turn into this obsessive research on personality disorders, manipulation, gaslighting. They kind of go through this obsessive process, okay? Which is, everyone goes through it. But I want you to, you talk to therapists and stuff all the time, healers, all those types of people. Think about how absurd it is in a relationship that was all about the other person. And then you start this healing journey that's all about the other person. Researching them, figuring out them, trying to be aware of them. Okay. And we all start there, makes sense. Like, oh, gaslighting, that's what that was. Oh, okay. This is how they treat everyone, not just how they treated me. It's not really all my fault, like they told me. Okay. But then I take them through this 3-step process of connecting with themselves, protecting themselves, and creating themselves. Because when you are in a toxic relationship, it becomes this enmeshment of it. Toxic people think of you as an extension of themselves. This is why they are nicer to other people and strangers than they are to a child, sibling, romantic partner, or even can be a friend or coworker. Okay. So I want you to think, if your arm wasn't working anymore, okay, your arm wasn't doing what you wanted it to do. You're telling it to grab this glass of water and it didn't. Okay. Mm-hmm. You don't ask your arm, why are you doing that? What are you doing? You take it in and cut it open. You take it to the doctor, get surgery, right? And when people think of you as an extension of them, They think they can do whatever they need to do to get you back in working order. And just like you would take if my hand wasn't working and the doctor said I needed surgery, I am not asking my arm permission to cut it open. But if a toxic person sees you as an extension of them, they will cut you open with their words. They will cut you open trying to get you back in line, because then they can control you again. And it is terrifying. So the very first piece of the process is connecting with your confidence again, clearing that confusion out of your head of like, oh my gosh, like who am I at this point? Like all I have become is an extension, an arm of someone else. How do I become my own person?
Yeah. I mean, within this relationship, is the person who is being taken advantage of, are they oftentimes or most often lacking in confidence? Is there or not?
Fabulous question. Yeah, fabulous question, because that's the assumption. And sometimes that is true. But what the many times within like the big five, they're very conscientious. Okay. It is the right thing for me to be loyal to my parent. It is the right thing for me to be loyal to my lover. It is the right thing for me to cover over other people's mistakes so they can hopefully become the best version of themselves. So sometimes it is a confidence issue. But right now, the language is that it's always a confidence issue. And I have talked to people who've seen like a confident mother. This girl, I was on a podcast called Marriage Matters, and she talked about her mother being in a toxic relationship. And she said, man, growing up, she was so amazing and she was so confident and she was so wonderful. And then she got in this relationship with this guy, and he basically turned her against herself. And she's become a shell of who she was. So what's really important, sometimes it is a confidence issue. But after a toxic relationship, it always looks like it was a confidence issue, because we're only studying the stage 4 cancer cells. You know,
how does one identify whether or not they're in a toxic relationship?
Who's getting the better end of the deal? And are they always getting the better end of the deal? That is the way.
To go into that in a little more detail, what does that look like? Define better end.
Is their interest jobs, hobbies, exhaustion level, needs, wants always more important than yours? Do you feel like you're always on defense? Do you feel like you're walking on eggshells? Do you feel like you're always performing? Do you feel like there's a finish line that you keep striving, and it just keeps moving?
Right.
You feel like you could never get on solid ground within the relationship.
Man, this is intense. It feels like, you have to be so careful getting into a relationship. And obviously, in a general sense, you do. But again, this feels like this quality, this aspect of getting into a toxic relationship can just slowly, like a cancer, right? Slowly emerge.
And I've seen people be in toxic work situations or toxic religious environments, or it really is so much more than a bad date or a bad marriage, because these people, this is who they are. There have been brain scans that say this is what their brain is like. This is who they are. The chances of them changing are very, very small. And we think about, I was born musical, right? I became a great musician because I put in the work practicing, but I was born musical. Some people are born more extroverted. Some people are born more intuitive. Some people are born more athletic. We feel really icky or scary saying some people may be born more selfish. That feels like, oh, we shouldn't say that, but it's logical. It's like, okay, is selfishness and being a good person or being able to be empathetic towards others, is that the only personality trait that we're going to pretend people aren't born with? That doesn't make sense. Right? And it is a nature versus nurture conversation. I mean, I don't want anyone to see their 2-year-old, being selfish and thinking, oh, they're doomed to have a personality disorder. That's not what I'm saying here. But some people definitely swing to, hey, I think the world should revolve around me, and I'm okay with that.
And also, I mean, it does seem like that to a large degree would be a learned behavior.
Yes.
Depending on what type of environment they were brought up in. But all right. So when did you write your book? Let's go into your book a little bit more about it. Tell us what the title of it is.
Absolutely. So it's Becoming Toxic Person Proof, which is kind of like the term bulletproof, toxic person proof. And it's about clearing the confusion and learning to trust yourself, which is really what it's all about, right? Because toxic people get you to trust their voice. Their voice becomes larger in your life. Their needs, their wants, their desires become more important than your own. And you have to learn to hear your own voice again so that someone doesn't try to talk you out of believing your reality.
Is there a type of toxic person? From what you're saying, I'm getting a picture of someone who is maybe at least outwardly uber confident. Maybe they're super manipulative. They're an extrovert. They're a very good talker. But upon closer inspection, they kind of look very slithery. But is there a prototype? Is there a typical person that
That's what's scary, is that toxic people can show up in different ways. That is one type. There's also something called like a covert narcissist, which I try not to get into diagnosing people I've never met. That's a really tricky, yucky type of thing. But, there's definitely people who, again, play that victim. How dare you not take care of me? How dare you have a life outside of me? What kind of husband, what kind of wife doesn't do what I want? How you're so selfish. But anyone who can really flip you and you start believing them more than you believe yourself. That is the type that, if people can hold on to that, because I see people get out of a toxic relationship with a fireman, and so then they think they can get an accountant and he's safe because he's not as extroverted or she's not as extroverted. And then we let down our guards. And I don't want people to live in fear. Like, the whole point of this is not that you live in fear. The whole point of this is that you're aware and that you open the door. Hello, who are you? And when you see from their actions, the pattern of actions, you feel confident in your ability to open the door wider or shut the door. That's really what it's about.
All right. Can you give us an example? Obviously, not disclosing people's identities, but of maybe people you've worked with or so forth.
Oh gosh. It's so interesting how often the pattern of religious leader comes up, not bashing, I have a very religious based background, not bashing religion by any means, but this person who on the outside, it's like, oh, they're saving the orphans. They're doing all this good work. They're willing to help everyone as long as it helps their image. Okay. But then behind closed doors, they're actually very selfish. They think you should almost be like almost a servant, kind of the arm example, right? You're just an extension of me. You're here to make me look good. You're here to be my emotional dumping ground. You're here to be my emotional punching bag. But on the outside, oh, they're so friendly. They're so kind. They're so helpful. They're so wonderful. And that is really difficult to counterbalance. Whether it be a sibling, a coworker, a husband, a mother, a wife, right. And they, on the outside, they look amazing, but on the inside, it's like poison.
Mm-hmm.
And they're
within. I was just going to say, within that example, there almost is an inherent power dynamic, right? The religious leaders appear in a sense, which almost kind of paves the way for certainly that type of relationship. So do people, you work with couples? Do you work with individuals, or?
I work with individuals. Sometimes some people have said I've saved their relationship. Some people have said, oh my gosh, I finally got away from them because of you. And it's when it is confusing and you're like, is it toxic? Is it not? Is it me? Is it them? How much is my fault? Right. And how much is not? then you start to clear the confusion and learn to trust yourself. I joke, I say, I certainly don't get extra points on my report card for people to get a divorce. Right? There's no report card, right? Oh, good. Another one got divorced, or another one stopped talking to their mother, or another. I mean, that's a horrible report card, and certainly not one that I have an agenda with. But learn to trust yourself, connect with your confidence, learn what toxic behaviors are, and learn to create healthy power dynamics within relationships. And I'm glad you brought up that power dynamics. An example I strongly recommend you teaching your children is the idea of a pyramid. Okay. So I have two biological kids, a son and a daughter. And if my son has won his baseball game, he gets to pick where we go to dinner. If my daughter is not feeling well that day, maybe she gets to pick what's on TV, or she gets to, it revolves around them. Mm-hmm. If my husband has a huge work event, I need to make sure the house is quiet, and he gets to be what I call at the top of the pyramid. And each person gets to take turns with their needs, their wants, their desires being the most important that day. In a toxic relationship, one person is always at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah, that's a good visual analogy.
And kids understand it too. If you teach kids, it's really as basic as taking turns. Right. And if you're like, oh, this guy, he's 45 years old and it's always his turn. It's like, if he has not learned to take turns at 45, he's been told his entire life to take turns. If he hasn't figured it out, we make it too complicated. We make it, well, he had trauma in his childhood, or he had this, or she had this, or she had that. It's like, they don't know how to take turns. They think they're always at the top of the pyramid. It is very simple. We make it too complicated, and toxic people are winning because we make it so complicated. Mm-hmm. They should take turns.
This is really bringing up some stuff about my own mom, my own mother, and putting her in that position and seeing about her after she got divorced with my dad. She was definitely in toxic relationships, and it's like you can't you couldn't explain to her, Mom, this is crazy. We had this joke with my mom, like, she would never get it until she needed to be hit over the head with a 2x4, but even then she wouldn't see it or wouldn't get it. What about people like that who are obviously in it, but they don't see it?
In my book, I talk about people who have ears willing to hear, or people who need to develop ears willing to hear, and some language to cut through with them. I've been running the Facebook group Finding Love and Success After a Toxic Relationship for several years now. And a lot of the research from my book came from surveys through thousands of women in this who were saying, what were your blind spots? How did you not see it?
Right.
Why did it take a 2x4 to get hit in the head? And it's hope. It's falling in love with potential. It's believing the best in humankind. Oh, it'll get better next time. I just need to keep sticking it out. I need to work a little harder. It's probably my fault. And I'm looking at your face right now. And this is like when I talk to people who've had mothers in this situation, you see them like, oh, I just thought she had low self-esteem,
But well, right. And I think she may have. And I'm also thinking, as you're saying that, you've mentioned self-trust a lot.
Yes.
And it seems like, so many pieces of the puzzle are in play with both parties in this. Mm-hmm. So the person who is in a toxic relationship, who never gets to be at the top of the pyramid, it seems that they're not trusting themselves.
Mm-hmm. They're not acting with an integrity to themselves. And it's a real belief system. If you believe that my job here on this earth is to be everyone else's servant or punching bag, or my needs are never important, and I don't mean like a servant's heart. Like I know in like several religious cultures, we want to do right by other people. But what happens is you really have to ask yourself, is my purpose here on earth to help everyone else be more selfish? Because that's spreading darkness.
Right.
It's not spreading light. But we don't, like, I'm kind of one of the only people saying that, right? Because before it's like, oh, you just need to give more. You need to put more into the relationship. You need to give 100%, and it creates, which is fabulous as long as both people are doing it and you're taking turns. That's exactly the right advice if people are taking turns.
All right, let me reintroduce you here. I'm speaking with Sarah Ramsey. The book, remind me of the book again, Sarah.
Becoming Toxic Person Proof.
Okay. And we'll have that linked up at the show notes page here at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. So do you also offer courses or what? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I work with people through the Wondrous Woman program, learning to connect with what's right with you, become toxic person proof, design a life you're excited about living, or connect with yourself, protect yourself, create yourself. Because that self-trust is built in creating a life you're excited about living. It's knowing who you are, living with an integrity of yourself. And I hope you hear my language, that it's not a powering over. I think sometimes when people say I'm toxic person proof, it almost seems like they're always bringing down the hammer. I don't put up with that. And I work very hard to work within that integrity energy, not because that sounds like fear to me. When you're having to throw the hammer out to everyone, that is not from a place of self-confidence. That is a place of self-protection.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't getting that from what you're saying.
But I want to point it out because a lot of people at my work, that's the language they would use. Like, you shouldn't have to put up with that. You deserve better, which is true, but it's the energy behind it. And I think being a wondrous woman, being toxic person proof, is knowing how to be kind without having your kindness used against you. It is living in integrity to yourself and others. It is choosing to spread light in the world and help others without helping them avoid their own inner work, right? Not covering over their weaknesses and selfishness or victimhood in such a way that, oh, they just need me. They just need me. They just need me. That's not good energy. It's not healthy energy.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this too sounds like, helping people understand what is a healthy relationship, what it means to be in a healthy relationship. And from what you're saying, I'm just getting so many images in my head of people I know who fit into this category. I asked you earlier on in the conversation about, abuse and trauma and so forth. But if we think about this on a continuum, is the experience of being in a toxic relationship, would you say that is inherently abusive? Is that person experiencing abuse by the very nature of the definition?
I had an incredibly difficult October with my stepson was in a car wreck in which another child was driving and died. He was like helicopter, like several people in my family had COVID all at the same time. It was a horrific 2-week period of my life. And everyone said, gosh, you seem to be doing so well. How are you handling this? I said, what I cannot handle is someone teaching me not to trust my own thoughts. That's like brainwashing. When you can't define your reality, which was what happens in a toxic relationship. It's like, I don't even know who I am. They're telling me the sky is green when I see blue. Right. That confusion, that fear, that distrust in the world and yourself, it is the worst thing you can imagine. It is the worst thing you can imagine. And so everything else seems like, okay, man, this really sucks about this child. This really sucks. Or I'm at the hospital. This really sucks. But it's not this like you're swimming in a fog. I can't even figure out what's real or not. Right. That is horrific to do to someone. That is horrific to do to another human. So he's absolutely abusive. It's horrible.
Yeah. Wow. This has been really enlightening for me. And I think it's going to be enlightening for a lot of listeners here. As we kind of wind down here, in addition to your book, which we'll have linked up, what other book would you recommend, whether, on the topic of toxic relationships or not? What would you want to share with our listeners? I'll
give 2 quick ones. One that is very true on the subject of abuse which is Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft. You can also look up on YouTube, Lundy Bancroft and Sarah K Ramsey. I think I'm on his homepage still, but our interview, if that's a good fit for you. But it is such a breakdown on controlling personality types. It's so good. So highly recommend him. And Lundy's a great guy. And then in the swinging side of happiness and healing, Buddha's Brain by Rick Hanson is fabulous in learning why difficult feelings stick with us and why we have to work harder to create happiness for ourselves. And it's not about Buddhism, contrary to the title, but it's just got some incredible things in there. And I find myself quoting that book, both books, all the time.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, again, this has been awesome. You are just filled with energy. And this, quite honestly, I don't think I've really dealt with this topic on the podcast. So I'm super glad you joined me today. Really want to thank you.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here and really passionate about spreading this message. And I'm glad you popped up with images in your head. That's really the purpose. I worked so hard to clarify my language around this, because if you started looking up articles, you can kind of get in this dark hole of like, whoa, this is so confusing, and personality types and personality disorders and trauma. And it is confusing, but really working to find streamlined ways to cut through that confusion and like something stick. Taking turns in a healthy relationship. People should take turns and play by the same set of rules. There should take turns at the top of the pyramid. That sticks, right? It makes it as simple as possible. So thank you for having me on, Guy.
All right, Sarah, take care. Bye-bye.